Have you seen a Blumhouse horror film lately? Hello and welcome back to the Coop-a-Log week 22 of 2026. And here we do have a Blumhouse horror film. This is an oddly interesting one for them because I think most of them fairly boring. Some have interesting premises, but of course, those who know that I am probably talking about Obsession because internet seems to be obsessed with Obsession. Although much of the discussion seems to be around the narrative of a very young creator, YouTuber in specifically, making it in Hollywood. Although this is more a testament to how horror is still the only genre where they allow mid-budget films to be produced, where some creators are given the opportunity to hone their craft. That is how it should be across the board, instead of just being relegated completely to the indie sphere to keep this going. And as you might have guessed, this week we had Obsession, and this was on the Tuesday, the 26th of May. It's a particularly hot day in the UK. That's when we had a heat wave, so I actually decided to hide from the heat. I did not plan to watch Obsession. I usually go to a Dolby or an IMAX, and this one wasn't playing in either of them. Until recently, because it is still playing in the cinemas as of the filming of this, which is now in July. Yes, this is the 26th of May film, which I'm filming this in July, which is a testament to how popular this film is, to where audiences are still showing up to watch it. And all things considered, I am happy, because maybe Hollywood will learn something from this. They should give the new blood an opportunity to do something, even outside the horror genre, because all it seems to be is the horror genre, despite the fact that I actually don't think Obsession is all that great. But I will get into that right now. Starting with a synopsis for those who are living under a rock and somehow don't know of Obsession, because, as I said, everybody seems to be obsessed with Obsession. So, and this is, I'm breaking tradition, because I usually start my synopsis saying like, a guy does this, or this happens to a guy or a woman, like it's a news report. But here I actually use names. So Bear is a guy, there we go, I caught you, ha. So obsessed with his long-time friend from school, Nikki. One night he buys a toy that promises to grant a wish. He wishes for his crush to love him more than anything in the world. The wish comes true and escalates. So within that, you can see where the film would naturally go. But my issue with this is that there is really no subtlety, and it ends up being far too repetitive in terms of the plot beats. Like, it's the same joke that they repeat again and again and again, and the impact ends up being lesser. The way I think this could have worked if Nikki doesn't go from 0 to 100 real quick, although arguably she goes way beyond 100 towards the end of the film, but even still I think there could have been a little bit more of a build up to it. And in general, my screening that I went to in a Curzon in Soho, which was fairly busy, a lot of the people were laughing, where I'm not entirely sure if that was the desired effect on people. But I think this film has more in common with a general Blumhouse film rather than something like an A24 elevated horror, even though it has little nuggets of that within there. I quickly picked up on the general idea of the film because I love Silent Hill, and this has some of that psychological elements in terms of where you can see that the character gets their wish, or it's something of a test for the character, but nothing is like it seems. And somebody in my audience gasped when at the reveal that the actual spoilers. This is a little bit of a spoiler. I don't think it is that much of a spoiler because the film doesn't do anything with this theme anyway. Nothing I would consider to be meaningful anyway. But somebody in my audience gasped at the scene where the real Nikki talks to Bear, like that was a plot twist. No, it was fairly obvious, to me at least. So in that sense, it has similarities with Silent Hill 2, where James goes to Silent Hill to meet his late wife, but ends up meeting Maria, who is like the actual perfect version of what he once wanted his wife to be. And in a way, it then ends up being as something of a test for him, done more gracefully. I don't think Obsession really lands with the whole idea, and sort of makes me wonder whether was like a late addition or that was there in the beginning. Just to give Curry Baker a benefit of doubt, I would like to believe that he had a more nuanced version of the film, a nuanced idea, that Blumhouse went in and said, no, we gotta make it more creepy. Oh, let's do it this way. The audience will love it. It's like a Blumhouse film with an art house aesthetic. It has some of that shallow depth of field. Some of the elements look nicely lit, and especially for a horror film, that it sets up a decent mood. It's a little bit still amateurish, just because apparently the bare minimum is now enough to be lauded as some sort of genuine mastery of, oh, it's so beautiful. No, it just has a little bit of a shallow depth of field. That in terms of blocking, in terms of staging, it's very basic. Framing is very simple. I think most of it is in the middle, uses shallow depth of field to really just highlight what you should be looking at. You could probably do a test where you could take the film 9:16 aspect ratio, which is the vertical aspect ratio, and see how much of the film would still be readable, because I don't think most of the screen space is being used. To me, it felt a little bit over-directed, which I wouldn't be too surprised given this is his first shot. And it's a director that tries too hard to make it impactful. And what I mean by over-directed, frames some of the elements. Like, for example, she'll be standing there talking to Bear and having one of their moments, and the light will be on her face, but then she like steps back, and then in the shadow, and now you can't see her face, and now it's scary. That is not... Okay, why would she have done that? Just stepping from here to here, that there is no reason for her to do within that story. That is only done that way because it's the director made that choice. It's like, oh, do it this way. Oh, that's gonna be creepy. Oh, you see, now she's in the shadow. Yeah, that's so creepy, isn't it? Or that element where she's like standing and then she goes back into the kitchen, it's like backwards. That's... Either, oh, let's say it's, oh, she's so obsessed with him that she can't even walk back without looking at him. But why is she walking back anyway? It's all of those elements just seem like somebody trying to over-direct this to be more creepy. And as I said, how much of that is just producers pushing the film? Oh, you gotta make it creepy. You gotta make it creepier. And I give Carrie Baker the benefit of the doubt, where a lot of my criticism originates from. I genuinely believe that. And as I said, in terms of the theme, there is genuinely an interesting idea at the core of the film, but it plays it like a usual Blumhouse film instead of an elevated A24 horror film, which even those, I know this is overplayed now, if anything, it's like, oh, another A24 elevated horror, but they have a room to exist, and I know that many have now turned on Ari Aster, but I would say that's more of a comment in terms of what people saw him as instead of what his work was really to begin with. And look, the way I think, it needed more escalation to be believable, show Bear being invested and the perpetrator, because otherwise he is like a victim in this situation, and this nice guy who, oh, well, he's like a silly little guy, he's a nice guy who made this choice and now he suffers from it and he can't escape out of this situation, where that is one of the aspects, I suppose, but I think that's misses the more interesting element there. Because the film makes Bear too much like a victim of circumstance than actually evil. And it's not banality of evil either. He made a dumb choice with no way out. It would have been an interesting conundrum for Bear to work through if he was given a choice. Because at that point in the film, when he makes the wish, he has no reason to believe that the thing is actually gonna come true. And you might say, well, he thought about it even for a second. Yeah, but how many times people will say something in the heat of the moment? Because people are not rational beings. Nobody is sitting out there and outweighing the consequences of every single word that they say to themselves. No, this is written. Bear is not a real person. He is a character that is written to explore an idea, if there is an idea. And this makes me question whether there is one, because Bear is such a stasis with only option for the tragedy to play out. And in that sense, maybe it is a little bit interesting that the character makes a choice and then is the tragedy that follows afterwards. There is no character arc here, as far as I can see. He makes the choice and then he has to suffer from it. He is never given an option to make the choice go away without just killing himself, which I suppose, yes, that is a character arc, that he just ends up killing himself. But I think that's just a little bit, like, too extreme, because he ends up killing himself not because of the guilt or the situation. He ends up killing himself because he knows he can't live with this escalating further and further. No, because that's why it just doesn't work. It does not have an interesting idea to it. I think it would have worked better if you actually gave Bear a choice. Like, for example, when he calls the company and it says like, oh yeah, Nikki's still here, and it's like, oh, she's actually in hell, and he has to go through some sort of ritual to go to hell to save maybe her soul, or he has to give up something that he really values, but or something else, to where there is a choice, there is a test for him, there is something for him to learn, and within that he can either fail to learn that and suffer the consequences and ultimately die, or have a character arc. But there is nothing there. He's in stasis, and that is, I wish there was more. And to provide some examples of films which also deal with the control that men impose onto women in terms of what they want them to be, you have a much nuanced version from David Lynch, Lost Highway. It has similar ideas at the core, and then in the second part it subverts them in interesting ways. I've covered this in one of the videos. It was on the 1st of February of 2026, so it would have been a few weeks back. I think it was like, what, week 5 or 6, so you can check that out. I think that's a much better example of what that kind of idea can be. Or even like something like Nosferatu has some of the elements of that, but I think Lost Highway would be a much closer example, whereas with Nosferatu there's just some general thematic overlap, but in very different film, and in terms of its, of course, tone and the idea. But even then, through that dynamic interplay between the different characters, and also has that element of the obsession, also some sort of weird connection, but within that the characters still have a level of agency, and within that you have a level of tragedy that ends up being there because through agency, that is what's interesting. Without agency, there is no real story, because it's just everything is in stasis. It cannot move. So if this film has given Bear an option to exit, but he doesn't take it, now that would be like, oh, this guy is evil. Oh, there is that one scene where he goes like, oh, what's so bad being with me, and that's just dismissed. And it does not go anywhere, does not impact him whatsoever. It's like a throwaway scene in the film that just feels really tacked on, and no actual bearing on the rest of the film. You can cut out that scene And all that will change is that maybe 90% of the Obsession fans would not have gasped at that moment. They still would have enjoyed it, because most people enjoy it for the, ooh, it's so creepy, oh, it has some shadows, because it has that art house aesthetic, but without any of the actual thematic density to make it an art house film. Also, one thing I would like to highlight here is the way the film uses weaponized mental health language. I'm not sure if it's specifically doing that to make fun of the people that use it, because it's like, well, she's taking advantage of you. It's like, oh no, you're taking advantage of her in there, or oh, she's going through like a thing. Which is, by the way, also where my issue with the film lies, that it has this super surrealist premise to where a wish comes true, but then everybody else tries to explain away the situation for grounded terms, despite the fact that the performance from the actress who plays Nikki, it's a very strong performance. In a sense, it is so strong, functions as the anchor of the whole film, but it is so heavy that it ends up sinking the whole film as a whole. Because the rest of the film, it doesn't have enough of a foundation around it to hold up that performance, and so it ends up like being a very one-note performance that ends up being played out as a joke again and again without being meaningfully elaborated upon. That is my take on Obsession, and I don't think Curry Baker intended to make it this way. I just think Blumhouse took an idea and stripped it of any of its emotional complexity to make it a Blumhouse horror film. A way that I think this would have worked way better, going back to Silent Hill 2, where Maria and Nikki in a sense are similar, in the sense that it's an object of what those two characters want. James is obsessed with Maria in a sense, or Maria is the manifestation of what James wanted, and Nikki being in a relationship with Nikki is what Bear wanted specifically, an obsession. But Nikki is being played out as a joke essentially, whereas Maria is what James wanted, and he has to suffer seeing her die across the film to learn the truth. In Obsession, Bear just has to admit that he made a dumb wish, and which he never had any real expectation to come true, and now he has to live with that. And I suppose it's like, be careful what you wish for tale, because that relationship with Nikki to that extent is not actually what Bear wanted. And it would have been interesting if there was actually some level of nuance to, like, well, she's a little bit more crazy than I wanted to, but he's just such a wet towel of a character to where he can't even say something like that. So you can't root for him, you can't hate him, because he barely has any actual character to him. I don't see what was the obsession with Obsession, because there is nothing there to anchor to, in my opinion. I think most people much prefer the narrative of a up-and-coming YouTuber being given this chance, making a very low-budget film, and it doing really good in box office. But that tale is all this time. Yeah, he's a bit younger than maybe most other directors, but something like that happened with Saw, I think, or the Blair Witch Project. I think it's very well established that horror is the genre where there is a lot more diversity and a lot more openness to mid-budget films, and that's the way it should be across all of Hollywood. And I just hope that Hollywood takes away the right lesson from this. And I will have a few other films I will cover in this week, but I think just given how much I've discussed Obsession right now, call this a little bit of a Coop-a-Log special. The special report here on the ground of why Backrooms is way better. That is also coming up, and yeah, and as I said, I genuinely think I blame Blumhouse. Yeah, I blame Blumhouse, genuinely. Because it seems like there is something there. There is an idea there. I fail to believe that they just wanted to make this like this. Yeah, and so yeah, if you actually go to the profile, you can find a few other videos as well, and especially in what was watched this week as well. Although, actually, you probably don't want to tune in for the next one, because it's